Hi, friends. Welcome again to Soaring Through Chaos. And the reason we do these conversations is because, yes, we are still in the middle of the pandemic. Things are not as easy as we would like them to be. A lot of people are going through challenges, whether it is in terms of health or the fear of ill health or economically job losses, the divisiveness surrounding us. And amid all this, there are people who have been really gone deep into finding what's their purpose in life and have found at least an idea of how to be happy. One of them is Jim McCarthy. I was told when I was an advisor to Project Happiness that I've got to meet Jim because he I think grew up or studied at the University of Iowa and also later at Stanford. So we had much in common, but we had never heard of each other. So I sent an email to Jim and said, can we talk about happiness? And that's how we got started. So tell me, Jim, how did you get started on happiness work and happiness research?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on your show, Shankar, and it's great to see you again. To answer your question, I think are, all of us struggle with happiness and sadness and the struggles of life. That's just part of the human condition. So all of us are thinking, am I happy? Am I fulfilled? Am I having enough fun in my life? Is there enough pleasure in my life? Is there enough purpose and meaning in my life? So we all struggle with these things. I had a career in Silicon Valley for more than 20 years, working at early internet companies, which is very fulfilling. You're right, I grew up in Nebraska and I studied at the University of Iowa, like you, as we found out. And then I had studied and worked in Austria, Germany, and Spain for about 6 years when I was in my 20s, then came to the San Francisco Bay Area in 1991, and then the career in Silicon Valley. But a huge turning point in my life was when my urologist called me up on February 5th, 2013, and he told me I had cancer. And he started talking about radiation and surgery and survival rates. And that was a huge shock to me. That was a huge turning point in my life. Because then for the first time in my life, I realized that this skin someday would be just as cold as this desk. I really grasped my mortality in a way that I never had before. I know a lot of us, we know on an intellectual level, we're not going to live forever. Life is finite. Everything dies that is living. We know that on an intellectual level, but this is the first time I really felt it in my gut, in my bones. Now, fortunately, my health is fine today. In fact, I got a very good test result just yesterday from the urologist, and I've been able to have a very holistic approach to my health through reducing stress, doing work that I love, really focusing on family, friends, and community, eating well, getting enough sleep, exercising, and putting this all together, I was able to really take care of my health in a way so we didn't have to do any sort of dramatic interventions with surgery or radiation or any of those kind of things. But on top of that, I started thinking, okay, my life is not infinite. I don't know whether I'm going to live another 50 years or 20 years or 20 months or 20 hours or 20 minutes from this moment right now. And as you know, you and I, we lived in California before, where, an earthquake could really take your life pretty much at any time. And over the years, I thought about this. I was like, well, how much longer can I really count on being alive? And I think 5 seconds was about 5 seconds was about the longest that I could possibly guarantee being alive. Now, this isn't a recipe for saying nothing matters, do whatever you want, don't plan anything, don't organize anything. That's not the case. But I think many of us live thinking we're going to live forever, which is not true. So when I got this epiphany about my mortality, I said, okay, I'm just going to do work that I care about. I'd always wanted to be a motivational speaker, but I'd never had the courage to try. I mean, not even try. And I thought, I think I'm going to try at least. And so I had a friend who was at the business school at Stanford. She was actually a cancer survivor. And she said, oh, why don't you talk to our entrepreneurship club, Jim? And so I shared with them that day when I got my cancer diagnosis And the 37 questions that I wrote out to myself that day, because when I'm in a moment of crisis, I start writing in my journal. And I had questions like, how long am I going to live? What's my legacy? What are my family and friends and community going to say about me? How do I feel about my work in terms of compensation, in terms of purpose, in terms of meaning, in terms of impact? What regrets do I have? What do I need to fix? Whether I have another year to live or another month to live or another 30 years to live, if I were to die today, how would I feel about these things? And what do I need to change? And so I shared that with the group. They really liked it a lot. And that led to the happiness workshops that I've been conducting pretty much ever since then, to corporate audiences, to nonprofits, students groups. My wife and I actually were in Thailand a few months ago, and I did it at this vegan yoga detox retreat center, which was just fantastic. It was really fun. And then after several years of doing that, I said to myself, well, you know, being the MBA that I am, it's like, well, how can this scale, right? I mean, it's one thing for me to sit in front of a group of 50 people or 100 people and share my story, and I'm thrilled that I can touch their lives in a positive way. But how can I get that to a larger audience? And so you know, people said, Jim, you got to put this into a book format. And so I dedicated a year to my life writing my book. I published it last March, so I don't know what, 14, 15 months ago. And the book is entitled Live Each Day, A Surprisingly Simple Guide to Happiness, which you can get on Amazon or different places online. So again, it's called Live Each Day, A Surprisingly Simple Guide to Happiness. It became an Amazon #1 bestseller in its category just for a brief period of time. But I'm told that if it's even #1 for a brief period of time, you can still call it a #1 bestseller. Now, I can go into detail on the book, Shankar, but let me just stop there and check in with you.
Well, I actually love the title of your book. And for what it's worth, I went and checked and I said, is it still the #1 bestseller? I can tell you one thing, every single person who reviewed your book gave it a straight 5.0. That's a very positive thing. And many of
Thank
my
you.
friends, including Randy Turan, the founder of Project Happiness, as well as Chip Conley, the advisor and strategist at Airbnb, also very much involved in finding meaning and joy in life. All these people are saying really great things. So it must be good. And I started reading the first chapter, which I give away for free. So this is not an advertisement, but I've known Jim long enough to know that he is speaking his heart, that he's always talking about how he's feeling in here and how he is in the world. So there's no dissonance between what you say and what you do. And that's what I truly appreciate about you, Jim. So tell me one thing. As you got into all this happiness work, one of the things I get asked all the time is, pursuing or happiness is like an oxymoron. You cannot keep pursuing happiness as a goal. Would you agree? Or what should be the approach to have a meaningful and happy life?
Yeah, so there are many great quotes from people who say, you know, happiness is the byproduct of other things. And there's even some research showing that when people really focus on just being happy, they get less happy, I think, from the frustration of that. So, yeah, I mean, you know, I call it Live Each Day, A Surprisingly Simple Guide to Happiness, because I don't say that it's a destination. I don't say it's how to find your happiness. I say very clearly it is something you create. So it's a byproduct of other things that you do. And one of the things I do is I come up with a framework because I thought in writing the book, part of it is my own personal anecdotes of all different aspects of my life, whether it's being an English teacher in Spain, or a business journalist, or selling phones door to door in the Bay Area, or working at Yahoo in the .com days, or traveling to India when I was, a long-haired hippie, 23-year-old student in Germany at the time. And so people say they like the storytelling that I do, but I also wanted to make sure that there's a strong basis of scientific research. So the book has, I think, 256 endnotes from all the scientific research from some of the best psychologists and neuroscientists and thinkers of our time to make sure that this isn't just nice, fluffy ideas, but it's really grounded on very firm scientific evidence. And then there's also the writing exercises where I ask people to ask themselves the same questions that I asked the day that I got my cancer diagnosis. What's my legacy? What's my purpose? What do I need to fix? How are my relationships? What work would really be purposeful for me? So kind of to answer your question, the framework I have for happiness is it's part pleasure, it's part purpose. And it's your own unique balance of those two things, which I think will create the most happiness for you. And both of these take effort. None of these things just kind of happen on their own. So if we think about pleasure and purpose, pleasure is having fun, having laughs, looking at a beautiful sunset, enjoying a wonderful meal, making love, right? Any of these are the pleasurable things in life. And it's easy to think, oh, that's just fluffy, pleasurable stuff. But you realize that is for the basis, that is the product of mindfulness. Mindfulness is that you're busy working, but you can look out the window and see that the clouds are just beautiful. Mindfulness is actually tasting the cup of tea that you're drinking right here and actually savoring it and enjoying it. Mindfulness is looking your friend in the eye and laughing and seeing that joy that you have together. Right? All of that is from living here in the moment and really savoring that. That is pleasure. Listening to beautiful music, that is pleasure. Now, if your life is just that, it's going to feel kind of empty after a while, right? Just sitting on the beach, sipping a cocktail, feeling the sun, hanging out with friends and laughing. If it's just that, it's nice for a while, but all the research indicates that that's not enough for most people to generate happiness and stay fulfilled, because it's not very meaningful. It's not very purposeful, not just alone. And the research indicates that the people who report being happy have a sense of fulfillment and a purpose in their life. That's the part that's meaningful. And the meaningful stuff is not necessarily fun, right? The meaningful stuff can be organizing for Black Lives Matters. The meaningful stuff can be being politically active. It can be studying very hard so you can become a physician so you can help save people's lives. It can be a social worker or a police officer, a peace officer. It can be many things that people find meaningful to make the world a better place. However they want to define it. It can be being a very good software engineer at a social media company and finding that very meaningful and the impact that you're having on people. So, but when you put these two things together, the pleasure and the purpose, then that seems to be things that you can very proactively do every day to help you create your happiness. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense to me. In fact, every single morning and evening I walk, and this is the picture I took today. This is the sunset, just before the sunset, the clouds above the construction that's going on. And every single day, that's what I do. This is like construction and wires and the clouds above. Because it reminds me of eternity. It reminds me that there is something above and beyond human creation, that there are skies and all that. Yes, the feeling of awe. It gives me that instant recognition. And at the same time having a purpose. And that's why I'm talking to you, Jim. Every day I've been talking to many people because it's not easy. It's not easy. I have a family member who is in his mid-90s. We don't know how long he's going to live. I have another I have a cousin aunt who has breathing problems. So these are the realities all of us are facing. And it's not limited to any geography right now. And all the more reason why having that sense of purpose has become more important. Taking care of immediate emergencies is necessary. And what can we do so that we don't have these pandemics? So tell me one thing. I've noticed that among the people that you have done this work with are some of the world's largest companies from some of the most biggest brand names. And conventional wisdom is that, oh, if you work for a big company and you have a secure job and you're making a lot of money, pick your number, $100,000, $1 million, then you must be happy. But that's not exactly what it is. What have you noticed? And I'm not saying pick on any one individual or one company, but what have you noticed working with so-called very successful people, whether it's at the Stanford Entrepreneur Club or among the MBAs? And I know you have probably caused thousands of such, you've talked to thousands of such people. So what have you noticed about being happy, being contented, and so on?
So that's a very good question. There's a lot going on there. So let me see if I can kind of unpack this in different ways. And by the way, before I forget, here's a picture from my balcony last night. So that's just a normal picture from the balcony. I'm here in Florida right now.
Wow.
Fort
And I'm in
Lauderdale.
Baroda, Gujarat. Yeah, wow. And
I'm sorry,
again, amid all the
where,
construction, amid all the urban stuff, you can still see the sunset, right?
yeah, and I'm sorry, where are you?
I'm in Gujarat, Baroda,
Gujarat, yeah,
and
okay.
that's not far from where Mahatma Gandhi started his work, about 90 minutes away from where Gandhi returned to India to do his work in Sabarmati Ashram. So yeah, I
Right.
tried to go to these places, but I haven't done so right now because of the pandemic.
Yes. Oh, that'd be cool. That'd be cool. Yeah. Actually, when I was traveling to India, I went to, among other places, I went to Rajasthan, to Pushkar and Udaipur before going down to what we used to call Bombay back in
Yeah,
the
Mumbai
80s.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Okay.
have traveled extensively in India the last 3 years. Yeah.
Cool. Cool. So to
And
answer
I
your
was in
question,
Mexico learning Espanol because I was
oh,
locked down.
oh, great. Great. So, okay. So to answer your question, what I found in dealing with, quote unquote successful people in, especially in tech, is a few different things. One is that we're very prone to what I call the comparing mind, and I write about this in my book. And the idea of the comparing mind is we tend to compare ourselves to other people, right? It's very natural. We live in a culture where advertising for all of our lives has told us, you're okay, but you're also kind of sick, and you'll be better if you consume our product or use our service or do this or do that. So advertising is constantly for a lifetime bombarded us with messages that you are inadequate. Now on top of that, you add on social media, where we're comparing ourselves not just to a fashion model walking through Manhattan or some successful business person somewhere, but we're comparing ourselves to what we view as our family and friends and our peer group. And of course, they're only showing the best parts of their lives. They're showing the great vacations they're taking, or the perfect children that they have. And you don't see behind the scenes to the stuff that's maybe not so perfect. So, and there's research that indicates when people spend time, whether it's on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or whatever, the moment that they turn off their computer or put down their phone, they feel worse about themselves than they did before that session of comparing themselves to everybody else. So social media can be a very dangerous thing. Now, so people compare themselves to other people, and the message that I give is, yes, you might be a vice president at a tech company. Yes, but if you compare yourself to other people, you will always be frustrated. I mean, I'm from Omaha, Nebraska, and if I wanted to be the richest guy in Omaha, Nebraska, well, I have to get richer than Warren Buffett. And that's pretty hard to do, right? So what I say is, don't compare yourself, even the people you like. That is a recipe for unhappiness. What you should do is compare yourself to yourself. How are you doing versus the person you were a year ago? How are you doing versus the person you were 5 years ago, 10 years ago? Are you kinder? Are you more compassionate? Are you more forgiving? Are you having a greater impact on your life? Are you developing your friendships? Are you a good son? Are you a good brother? Are you a good brother-in-law? Those are meaningful questions. And I shouldn't be comparing myself to you or comparing myself to James Doty or Randy Turan or Chip Conley, because if I do that, I'll feel horrible. I'll feel completely inadequate compared to those people, let alone the Dalai Lama or Gandhi or someone like that. But if I say, you know, how is Jim McCarthy today to who I was a year ago or 5 years ago or 20 years ago? Who is that kid coming out of a all-boys Jesuit Catholic high school in Omaha, Nebraska in 1982? And how has he gone out into the world? And what has he done? And who has he helped? What kind of an impact has he had on other people? The teams he's led, the people he's managed, the people he's hired, the people he's married, the children that he has. If I think about myself in that way, that's a useful exercise. And I can beat myself up over things that didn't go well, or I think I could have done better. But it's like, okay, well, guess what? Today is what? August 4th, 2020. So today, going forward, how can I be the best husband for my wife, who's on the other side of that wall there? How can I be the best brother-in-law for the three you know, brothers and sister-in-law that I have? So that's one thing. Another thing I'd say is that a lot of money. Not that I'm so wealthy, but I've been very lucky, especially as I imagine what my life was going to be like leaving Omaha, Nebraska in 1982. So I've been very fortunate in my life. And I even wrote in a blog post on LinkedIn once saying, acknowledging my straight white male privilege, which was quite controversial. And this was like 4 years ago. And I think if I posted it again, I think it would be even more controversial today. But so I'm aware of the privilege I've had. I'm aware of the great fortune I've had. But I know that when I earned some money at Yahoo in the .com era, it solved certain problems, but it created a whole different set of problems. And I'm not looking for sympathy or pity or anything like that, but I just know that money cannot solve every problem. And there are lots of people dying in this pandemic who have plenty of money. They've got plenty of money. It is not enough to save their lives. So to realize the limits of material things, to realize that not everything can be fixed by pulling out your credit card or opening up a checkbook or trying to buy your way to safety, buying your way to security. Yes, in this pandemic, we know that's happening, and obviously having access to good healthcare is important. But when we realize that there are limits to what we can do, then I think it helps us focus on what we do control and focus on what really is important. And I like this quote from Dan Gilbert from Harvard University. He's a psychology professor there, and he says, "We're happy when we have friends, and we're happy when we have family. And pretty much all the other stuff we do is to just get more friends and more family." And I think, Shankar, that in this pandemic, we're beginning to really sense that more than ever before. I'll just stop there for a second and check in with you.
In fact, I read Dan Gilbert's Stumbling on Happiness several years ago. And just like I called you, this was before you wrote the book, Dan's book was already out there. So I called him and said, I want to meet you. And sure enough, he was in the Bay Area and I got to meet him once. I guess I'm a fan of people who talk about these difficult things. Dan Gilbert was honest to say that you cannot plan on happiness, but you can plan on looking at the things that make you happy and the things that make you unhappy, letting off those things that are hurting, and beautiful, beautiful work. Speaking of which, one of the things I've noticed is your dedication to some of these causes. Once you were diagnosed with cancer, and I'm so happy to know that you've done well, at least in terms of the numbers and everything. I see you donating a part of the proceeds to the American Cancer Society. I also see you working on holistic health and integrative healthcare. In what do you see is happening in the world of cancer and diseases? I know neither of us is an expert on healthcare, but the fact that you're putting your money where your mouth is, you must be tracking some of the work that's happening in these areas.
Yeah, well, I mean that's nice for you to mention. Yeah, I mean, and I could do more. I'm sure I could do more than what I'm doing currently. But it's, even my own personal experiences, it's been amazing that I've seen doctors who are like, okay, this is your diagnosis. We should do surgery in the next month. But then you talk to other doctors in the same institute, in the same organization, and they're saying, oh, I'm not so sure. You could have a different approach to this. And others where they're going to come forward with, here's what you can do in terms of stress reduction. Here's what you can do in terms of meditation and lowering your blood pressure. Here's what you can do in terms of better diet. Here's what you can do in terms of sleep and lifestyle. So fortunately, even when I got my initial diagnosis, I kind of felt like, look, let's take a holistic approach to this, and that seems to have worked well for me. So the best doctors that I see are the ones where they're using the best of Western medicine, the latest technology, the best practices, the best that medical science can do. But they're also saying, well, wait a second, why is it you're 30 pounds overweight? Why is it you're sleeping 5 hours a night? Why is it you're not going for walks? These are things you can control. And it takes some discipline. In fact, at the very end of the book, after everything that I talk about, I put in a little chapter on how to create habits. Because so many motivational books and inspirational books and self-help books, they have all these nice ideas, but nowhere in there do they really explain, okay, how do you start doing this tomorrow? Right? What is it that you can do tomorrow and start doing on a regular basis to really make these things take place? So I looked into some of the best research on building habits, and wrote a very short chapter on how to do that. And it can be as simple as putting on your calendar every day at 7 a.m. for 30 minutes, do yoga, do meditation, do stretching, and in fact, what I call it is the magical 1%. So what I did is I'm thinking about time and about input and output and efficiency, and I'm thinking, well, if I meditated for 10 minutes per day, which I normally do, what percentage of my waking hours is that? Do you have any idea, Shankar? I just tipped you off to the answer,
You
but
just gave the number 1% probably.
1%. Yeah, I did the math. I said, okay, well, 10 minutes is what percentage of my waking hours of the day?
That's
It's
true
almost,
because in a day we have 1440, right? There's an organization 1440. So 440 must be sleep then, huh?
yeah, there's the sleep, which is, roughly 7 or 8 hours. But if you've got 10 minutes out of 16 hours per day that you're awake, it's almost
Yeah.
exactly 1%. And
Wow.
I said, okay, if I spent 10 minutes per day in meditation, or 10 minutes per day in a mixture of meditation, positive affirmations and positive thinking, because your brain can be hardwired for positiveness and happiness, and then a few minutes of either a gratitude practice or a forgiveness practice, uh, that 1% per day of that practice will make the other 99% of your day better, right? It's been scientifically proven. You do all of these things, and that 1% of your day is going to make the other 99% of your day more peaceful, more forgiving, more positive, open to the beauty, more mindful, living in the present, also focused on what you're doing that's meaningful and purposeful. So
Okay.
okay, so what I was saying was that if you put in your calendar every day, whatever time of day you want, whether it's 7 a.m. or noon or 10 p.m., my magical 1%. And then in that, you spend 10 minutes of either meditation, positive thinking and affirmations, gratitude practice, forgiveness practice. If you do that, the reminder will help you do it. And then you just, check a box or whatever and say, yay, I did it this week, or I did it today. That's a very easy reminder, and that's how you create a very positive habit. So if you spend 10 minutes a day doing meditation, affirmations, gratitude, forgiveness practice, that 1% of your day is going to make the other 90% of your day a lot better. And that's how you generate a solid habit, and you actually operationalize this stuff, which seems very fuzzy, but actually is very practical.
In fact, what you're saying is so important, Jen, from happiness research as well as from wisdom traditions. No matter which wisdom tradition you go to, whether it's Catholic Christianity or it's Hindu or Islam, they say at least, some say once a day, but many of them say morning, lunchtime, dinner time, sunrise, sunset, lunchtime, every meal. Just remembering grace. I remember it's called grace in Christianity, Amazing Grace, beautiful song. In Hindu traditions, we call it Chitravati. Again, remembering the divine, thinking about who created the food, thinking about where are we getting all this abundance from, and it changes life. In fact, I think it's so important that Zoom decided to put a pause as you were speaking this. So it was like a mindful pause. And I said, Jim is going to come back and we're going to repeat this again. So you've been doing this work now for probably a decade, isn't it? You've been in
About
happiness
7 years.
research,
About 7
happiness
years.
workshops, and
Yeah.
related to things like this. What next? Because there's always so much to explore. And there have been a lot of good books, TED Talks, as well as workshops. Where do you see yourself going further?
So for, I mean, that's a good question. I decided to take a year off, sort of to go on sabbatical. I continued to do some work, but my wife was able to leave her work, and so we decided to travel the world. I continued to do some workshops and some talks, but I worked really hard on getting my book written. And then a few months later, we packed up our condominium in San Francisco, rented it out, and started doing traveling. So we were in, this time last year, I think we're in France. So we were in Europe for 3 months, and then we went to Asia for 6 months. And in the middle of that, the pandemic happened. And we were in lockdown in Thailand for about 6 weeks, which actually worked out great. And and then we came back to the U.S. because we wanted to see our families, and we had some business to take care of. And now we're here in Florida, and it's sort of hard to travel to a lot of places, especially outside of the U.S. Now, that's a lead up to saying that I'm so happy, and my wife is so happy that we traveled when we could. Now, we had no idea of knowing that there was going to be a global pandemic, which would be shutting down borders all over the world and making it scary to even like leave your apartment every day. But I think there's a strong lesson that we can all take from that, which is that I did not say to myself, I'm going to wait until I'm 60 or 70 to travel. I've got so much important work to do. I just wrote a book. I've got to promote it. I've got to get it in front of more people. I've got to work my butt off in order to promote my book so people can buy it and benefit from it. Now that was purposeful for me, and it still is, and it's still meaningful for me. But there's the purpose part in which I worked very hard writing my book for a year. But then there's the pleasure part, which is, I don't know how long I'm going to live, and I want to enjoy my life. And my wife wants to do a lot more traveling than she's ever done, and we love to travel together. So we embarked on this 1-year global nomadic journey. And the amazing thing, first of all, it was great. What we learned about ourselves, what we learned about life, about the world, politically, culturally, spiritually, was incredible. But on top of that, it's just amazing to think that the trip we did a year ago, a human being cannot do today.
That's true.
It's impossible. It is impossible to cross those borders without quarantine, get on those planes, go from this country to that country, do this, do that, enjoy ourselves the way we did. It's impossible. So we're very grateful that we did it while we could. We look forward to a day when we can do it again and when everyone in the world can enjoy it like that. But it's a good lesson, I think, that don't assume you have forever to do what you want to do, because many of us are unpleasantly surprised when we run out of time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, in fact, I spent 3 years in India. The last time we met was just before I think I left the United States, about 4.5 or 5 years ago. And I mentioned to you that I'm finally letting go of my comfort zone. I remember asking you the very first time, how did you let go of your comfort zone, the paycheck or the study thing? And you said, I just created a spreadsheet or something. I remember vividly how there's a planning part, and then there's the faith and risk that you have to take. And I did that, and thanks to you, I think 3 or 4 years after we met, I resigned from Synopsys and told them that this was my mission. And I came to India for 3 years, traveled extensively in India, which is hard to do right now. And then at some point, I felt I need to take my dance of compassion around the world. So I started in South Korea, and by the time I reached South Korea, everybody was in a mask in February.
Hmm.
And then I went to San Francisco. A month later, the shelter in place started. 2 days before shelter in place, I reached Chihuahua and later Cuernavaca and Ciudad de Mexico. And I'm like, okay, I cannot go back to India. I cannot go back to California. So I spent 3 months learning Espanol and going through the, lots of things to do and learn, and the generosity of the Spanish people. If anybody's listening, I'm so grateful. What do you call it? Ustedes muy amable. So amazing, amazing cultures. But you're right. I mean, now I'm trying to go to Africa, lots of hurdles. And I'm grateful that we've had these luxuries, if we can call it that, to be able to do it. And now being every day talking to a friend like you makes my day. Every single day, I try to make a point to reconnect with people who I'm grateful for. Because if it wasn't for meeting Jim McCarthy, I probably would not have left Synopsys. So,
Wow.
so
Wow.
you know
Well,
how
that's good to
you know
hear.
how in small ways we make a big difference to other people's lives and don't even realize it. And this is the first time
I
I'm
didn't
telling you.
realize that. I did. Thank you, Shankar. I had no idea, and I mean, there's times when when you write a book or whatever, when you think, okay, I wish sales were better. I wish I was having, not because of the money really, because I mean, rarely do books make much money at all. I have a friend who's an author and he says it's the worst way to make money ever. But, but the impact that you have can be beautiful. And you're right, like, if 10,000 people benefited from my book or from my TED talk or whatever, that's great. But even if it's 10, even if it's 10 people, it's like, well, oh, I guess I helped 10 people, and that's better than none. So that's great to hear. I think another thing is there's something about the pandemic and lockdown. First of all, I think people are more aware of mortality than before. I think we are seeing family members who are ill or in nursing homes, um, which is a very difficult situation for all sides involved. And so I think the hovering mortality, usually the mortality is kind of like hovering outside of the frame. And I think now mortality is like right in our face for many of us. And that is forcing people to really be aware, okay, do I need to call my sister and check in with her? Am I talking to my mom and dad enough? How are things with my kids or my stepkids? What can I do to help other people? And the answer isn't always doing a Zoom call, but sometimes it is. The answer isn't always writing a blog, but sometimes it is. The answer isn't always getting politically active, helping people register to vote if you have an important election coming up, especially if you live in a swing state. But sometimes it is, right? So I think the pandemic is forcing us to really focus on what's important. And Shankar, before I got on the phone, I was sort of ruminating on this, and I think I was meditating, and I wasn't thinking about this, but this idea popped into my head, because I think the name of your series is what? Thriving in Chaos, is that?
Soaring through chaos. Yeah.
Soaring.
Yeah.
That's
Seema gave
even
the word
better.
soaring. Yeah.
That's even better. So I started thinking about that, and I realized that we are living in chaotic times. Um, and but chaos can be a challenge, it can be a risk, it can be a threat, but there can also be opportunity. And I realized that part of that is that if you need to be flexible, right? You need to say, okay, I'm not going to do this, I need to do this. Or this is a hard time to do this, but here's a new opportunity that I hadn't realized. And when you realize to be flexible, you need to be in the present moment. You can't be wedded to something that is in the past that doesn't even exist anymore and is done. You can't use an old paradigm when there's a new paradigm. Or at least you're using the old paradigm when there's a whole new paradigm where there's a lot of opportunity. And to do all of this, it helps to be mindful, right? If you're not here in the present, if you're wedded to the past, if you're stuck in the way things were, you're going to be frustrated and you're not going to see the opportunities ahead of you. So that's where like a meditation practice or a mindfulness practice or even going for a walk every day. And in my book, I write about all different sorts of mindfulness practices. That will help you be at peace with what is. And I quote the serenity prayer, right? May I have the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And there's a lot of things going on in our world right now that people they do not have the power to change. Even very, very powerful organizations, institutions, politicians, government organizations, non-government organizations, there's a lot that they cannot change, as try as they must. And we have to kind of make peace with some of those things. But then, of course, there's things we can change, we can influence, and we need to do the best we can to make those changes. So all of that helps us kind of be grounded in reality, grounded in where we are, and then seeing what can we do going forward. And for me, that would be the recipe for soaring through chaos. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Jim, that's exactly why I wanted to talk to you, because this perspective and what I would call the gift of the pandemic, it's not fun. As I said, two people in my own family and friends are going through potentially the risk of loss of life right now. So I'm not going to trivialize the situation we are in, but that brings me even more present and make it a point to every day check on them, to be just there around them, or to remember and be grateful for the gifts that I received, not only from them, but from every other person, including my own family. My family is far away right now. I'm the only one in India. Seema just reached, is on her way to San Francisco. The kids are going to meet her there, and then we disperse. We become an intercontinental family right now. When the pandemic struck, we were on 4 different continents. But that made me realize the importance of, just being present, even if it's through WhatsApp, even if it's through Zoom. Before we had FOMO, fear of missing out. Now we have FOZO, fear of zooming out. Will I be able to zoom with Jim or not? Well, what if my screen freezes? But again, these are fears. To be
Yeah.
able to really appreciate what we've got, to be able to appreciate, the changes, it takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of courage.
Agreed, and a sort of a reframing. I know that Jack Kornfield, who's one of my heroes, right, the great Buddhist teacher, he describes how the nature of anxiety and fear is it's always something out there, like right now is fine, right? Right now, I look out and I see Fort Lauderdale in Broward County in Florida, which is one of the is one of the worst hotspots in the whole planet for the pandemic. And so I can look out there and I can be scared, and I am scared. It's like, well, I don't want to go out. I don't want to interfere with anybody. I'm taking every precaution I can. But right here, right now, where I sit inside my apartment, things are fine, right? We have food, we have enough to drink. My wife is here. We have fast internet connection. I'm not too worried about being able to pay the bills, which is a great luxury to have. So it's always that, well, now is fine, but what's going to come next, which I think is the nature of anxiety and fear. And if we can at least recognize that and say, well, yeah, something horrible might happen 2 months from now or a month from now or something beyond my control. But right here, right now, I get to talk to you. It's a beautiful morning. The clouds are very pretty. I have a nice view out here. I can see the ocean that way. We missed a hurricane, or the hurricane missed us. And and so that kind of presence, I think is a great way to cope with the uncertainty and the chaos that is more accentuated than it ever has been in our lives, I think.
And you earlier alluded to the earthquakes. There was one in Oaxaca. I think just the day I left Mexico, there was a minor one in New Delhi, and there was a minor one in the Bay Area also. So Southern California, Los Angeles area.
Yeah.
So uncertainty is always there. People are, me included, are taking it much more seriously now. Even a 4.0 or a 5.0 earthquake really kind of brings out the alarm bells. The amygdala is definitely in high gear. So yeah, I mean, it's times like this that it is necessary to bring us to that stillness and say, I'm here now. And do you have any last words that you may have missed out? Anything you want to tell people? And also how they can reach you?
Uh, I think I've covered most of what I wanted to say. They can reach me, they can go to my website, which is jimmccarthy.com. So that's JIMMCCARTHY.com, jimmccarthy.com, or you can email me, jim@jimmccarthy.com. I'm always delighted to hear from people and answer questions and help them if I can. I have a TED Talk called What Cancer Taught Me About Happiness. So if you can search for that, or just search on Jim McCarthy Happiness, you'll see my different blog posts. There's a lot of stuff I have on LinkedIn. So that's how they could reach me. I would like to ask you a question though, Shankar.
Sure, sure.
Turn the tables for a second.
Yes, of course.
So you've been doing a lot of traveling this last few years, and you might have touched on this, but let me just sort of rephrase the question. What has been the biggest surprise you've had in what you've learned about yourself or about life or about the world or about people in the last few years of your travels?
Well, you know, something really struck me, and today was the day when I had that epiphany. Um, Wherever I go, I find that people have limited views. In other words, you know, depending on their exposure to life, in Gujarat, people are more exposed to Gujarat. In California, people are more exposed to California, and so on. And I used to have some sort of intolerance for why can't they see the bigger picture? So today I came up with a phrase which is um, hating haters is a form of hatred. Being, in, being intolerant about intolerance is also a form of intolerance. So that was my biggest learning today. And this has been going on for the last 4 years because you know, this is that self-righteousness that comes up. I think it was Alan Watts who called it spiritual materialism. So because I have lived in many different places, because I've read many other books, such as your book, or you know, books on philosophy, Vedanta, and the Bible, I have this fake notion that my conditioning is less, that my views are broader, that my horizon is nice, you know, I can see much more, and so on. And if that's truly the case, I would be more tolerant. And I Seema reminds me of that all the time. I would truly be compassionate, and that's not the case. So being, you know, being upset or at those who are not compassionate is a form of not being compassionate. So who am I to tell people that they should be tolerant, that they should be compassionate, and they should be, you know, have a broader horizon? I need to practice it for myself. So that has been my biggest lesson. And to be honest with you, yeah, I kept looking for the ideal place to serve. There's none, it's here and now. So I was almost trying to run away to Africa, thinking maybe I'll do something there because people, from whatever I've heard, there's more poverty in Africa than in India, certain areas of Africa. But there's misery everywhere, there's joy everywhere, there's tolerance everywhere. there's intolerance everywhere, is how I see it. That has been my biggest lesson, honestly. And thank you for asking that question.
Well, I'm glad I asked. That's actually a very refreshing and somewhat surprising answer. And the honesty that it shows is impressive.
And honestly, by the way, I will be sharing the contact information for you as well as for me. So people who are still with us, please remember that there is no one person, including me or Jim, who has all the answers.
Oh,
We are
definitely.
all in this quest for understanding the nature of life, how to find meaning, how to find a sense of purpose, how to enjoy this present moment. But we are all here to learn from each other. Jim has done amazing work, and I'm a big fan of his. And as I mentioned, if it wasn't for Jim, I probably would not have resigned so early in life. I actually let go of all my tech work at the age of 52. And the last 4 years have been really good because I'm now a consumer, user of technology, and I blog almost every day. But honestly, it has given me a wider perspective and has removed my blinkers from the tech perspective. How about you? You have traveled away from Silicon Valley also quite a bit, isn't it? You must have seen a different world.
Yeah, yeah. I'm glad you brought that up because honestly, and I mean, this whole conversation, I try to be very honest, but I don't miss it. I
Oh,
don't, I,
wow.
I don't miss Silicon Valley. I don't really miss San Francisco. Obviously, we have friends there. I spent almost 30 years of my life in the Bay Area, all over, from San Jose up to San Francisco and in the East Bay as well. So the people are great. I still love tech. I still love the innovative spirit. But there's a lot to the world beyond that. There's a lot to human existence beyond that. And and I mean, Shankar, I could be dead a month from now from the pandemic.
Yeah.
You could too.
Any one of us.
Anyone, let alone something else happening, like just getting hit by a bus crossing the street or whatever. So realizing that for me, it's not morbid. It's just a healthy realization of what life can be or how short life can be. So I'm glad that I mean, this is a very flip phrase, but it's sort of like been there, done that. I mean, I had a good career. I could look back and say, well, I could have done it better. I could have done it differently. I could have had more status. I could have had more power. I screwed this up. I screwed that up. I got fired here, which is all true. Um, but there's a point where it's like, enough of that. Let me do something different and see how I like it. Let me experience the world in a different way. And there's something that it's funny, you and I have so much to talk about. It's like we wrapped up the interview and now we're like starting over again.
Exactly.
Which is
Because
fine by me. I've got time.
it's these personal anecdotes, it's the vulnerability and the willingness to share what we're going through that I want people to
Yeah.
know that this is the reality you and I face every day.
Yeah, and so the thought I wanted to complete was for many years I've said you can have it all but not at the same time. And I knew people at business school who were very smart, talented, accomplished people, and they kind of wanted maybe myself as well, but they kind of wanted to give the impression that they had this amazing tech startup job where they were a co-founder or a founder and a great partner, a spouse, and two incredible children who are just doing great things. And of course, they're doing volunteer work and community work, and they're wonderful children to their parents, and they're doing philanthropy, and they're doing all this stuff. And as far as I could tell, I could never see, oh, and they're taking great care of their health, right? And they're really good golfers or whatever. And I just never saw anyone who did all of that at the same time. And people try to give the impression that they were, and maybe they were, and it was just this mystery to me, and I'm just not giving them enough credit. But I kind of feel like people were kind of either maximizing on career or maximizing on family or optimizing for health. But doing all of these things to the max is just kind of like a symptom of the obsessive nature of our society, of this kind of hyper competitive society that we live in, especially in a place like Silicon Valley, where you have so many people who are really accomplished and they're used to being really good at everything that they do, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So I say that because I say, look, there was a time in my life when I was working 70, 80 hours a week at Yahoo in 1997, 98. It really screwed up my health. Mentally, I was not good after a while. And then there are other times in my life the same thing happened again. There are other times where I took a year off to be a stay-at-home dad. I'm very grateful that I did that when my older daughter was 1 year old. So I'd say, yes, there might be times when working your butt off in a tech job is exactly what you should be doing. There are times when really focusing on your health is exactly what you should be doing, or really focusing on your family and your relationships. And other times when people like have this sort of steady balance of it, and they're able, there's no big wins, there's no big home runs, but they have a very nice sort of stable life, which is very sustainable. And that might work too. So I got to a point where I said, I've worked enough, even the motivational speaking and the writing the book, I need to take a break from that. And I'm really glad that we did. So going forward, I don't know. We'll see how it plays out.
Well, we'll probably have to talk again a year from now and
I
see
hope
how
so.
things are. And I mean, you said that earlier. There's this balance between pleasure and purpose, and each one has to find the right mix at that time. It's not. There is no standard on these things. There are times in our lives when we seek pleasure, especially a single person getting into a relationship for the first time. Of course, that is what they need to be doing. But having been through enough of those things, solitude actually is appealing sometimes. So
Yeah.
different things at different times, and the different mixes. Yeah. So I'm glad we talked about so many things, and I'm glad some of you are still listening to me, I think, to us. And any questions, you know where to find us. Please stay in touch. And thanks
Thank you,
again, Jim.
Shankar. It was great to see you again. Thanks for reaching out, and we'll talk again. Stay
We'll
safe.
talk again soon.